Hello again. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump, they've been rather busy in that high-stakes meeting in Washington. They are huddled up in the White House. All eyes, of course, on the likely impact of that meeting, what it could mean for the future of US-India relations. The key areas of focus there have been pretty clear: trade, defense, technology, and of course immigration as well. So will this meeting mark a turning point in resolving tariff disputes or not? Can we expect a deeper defense partnership between India and the US? And what about technology collaborations and immigration policies, which are crucial for India's skilled workforce? To discuss the broader implications of this meeting, what it could mean for businesses on both sides, really, of the Indian and the American side. To discuss this, we're joined by Atul Keshap. He's the president of the US-India Business Council. Mr. Keshap, welcome to ET Now. Glad you could make the time for this conversation. Tell me, how surprised were you when Mr. Trump, just before this meeting, spoke about imposing reciprocal taxes just ahead of this meeting? How crucial was it? He said today is the big one. Did that cause jitters?
Look, if you read, thank you, Vikram. If you read the writings and statements of President Trump and his key advisors over the years, it doesn't come as a surprise. You know, they've always talked about reciprocity. They've always talked about the use of tariffs, and they've always talked about keeping things on a level playing field. So from my perspective, what this looks like is the opening rounds of a negotiation. And between friends, many things can be achieved. And I think that the two leaders are going to talk with great ambition about how we can transform our trade relationship. To be very honest, the relationship on the trade side has been stalled for a few years. There hasn't been any real trade innovation coming out of Washington. And I think we need a little bit of an oomph, a bit of a push to try to get us to the next level. You know, at $200 billion a year in bilateral trade, we are vastly underpowered compared to the size of our economies. So something needs to get done. And I think this is a good way to get things rolling.
So, Mr. Keshap, when you talk about oomph and a push, which areas do you think the two sides have a meeting point that is the strongest that is coming through in this meeting? Because some believe that this meeting has been high on optics, but when you talk about deals getting struck, the expectation was always that it would be large brushstrokes. So when you talk about oomph and a push, the areas that you think have been most important before this meeting ever happened?
Well, so look, I look at things from a diplomatic perspective because of my career. And I think one thing that's extraordinarily important is the personal relationship between the two leaders. A lot can get done if there is a good basis of friendship between the president and the prime minister. And there already is. You know, the fact that Prime Minister Modi is one of the very first leaders to visit Washington so early in this new Trump administration sends a very strong signal to the respective bureaucracies about their ability to be ambitious. And so whether you look at the Indo-Pacific or the Middle East or Africa or any other area around the world, there's a lot of convergence already between Delhi and Washington. Look at our people-to-people ties. Look at our technology convergence, supply chains. The list goes on and on. I think we're going to probably see a couple of very important initiatives coming out of this summit. One on trade, where I think both sides are going to set a deadline for putting together a meaningful trade agreement. And the other on defense, where both sides recognize that they need to show strong deterrence. They are the two strongest free countries on earth, and that we need to work together to show our strength in the 21st century. And then there may be a third area where we acknowledge that we're in a foot race on artificial intelligence with competitors who are not very friendly. And therefore, Delhi and Washington and our two societies need to work together to intensify our lead. So I'm quite ambitious and optimistic. I hope that this will be the impetus for real negotiations on trade, where we talk honestly and as friends, respectfully, about issues and pain points, tariffs, non-tariff barriers, bureaucratic red tape that serve as non-tariff barriers that really inhibit our companies from prospering. Indian companies and American companies are great corporate citizens. They invest well, they generate jobs and tax revenue, they innovate. We need to unleash that. We cannot afford to keep it restrained in an era of great power competition.
So the potential, like you're pointing out, is great. How much of that is going to get tapped is going to be something that we'll be watching out for. And that has to unfold over a period of time, because it's not just one meeting that is going to do the trick, but it could set the tone. So when you talk about the tonality, in this kind of bonhomie that you're talking about between the two leaders, how much of that do you see actually in play at a meeting where it's all about tough negotiations? And this tariff thing has been going on for such a long time, and the US, and Trump in particular, has made their stand very, very clear that we need reciprocity, and America wants to do business where there is a balance.
So first of all, there's public statements and public posturing, and then there's private discussion. And President Trump, Secretary Bessent, Rick Grenell, and so many others, Navarro, Lighthizer, have been very clear in their perspectives about addressing these imbalances in trade. But the truth is that when you look at the tariff structures, India does remain one of the most protectionist large economies on earth. And that may be designed to protect certain Indian industries. But from another perspective, it may actually restrain India from being globally competitive. And it may inhibit India from achieving more FDI and job creation. And it may inhibit the growth of the GDP of India and the prosperity of India. So it may be useful to start looking at these things. And certainly there is a strong feeling in America about this. And I think our Indian friends will visit with that perspective, that they understand the feelings in the United States, and that is a basis for negotiation. So I actually think that with that awareness, and India already having cut some tariffs before Prime Minister Modi's visit, it is indicative that there may be possibility for a new ambition in our trade talks. As I said, we've been absolutely flat for the last 4 years. Let's get going. Let's tackle the tough issues. Yeah. Let's see how we can benefit each other. Forget about giant, global deals. What's good for America? What's good for India? What's good for our GDP? What's good for our leadership in the world? If we can focus on that, I think we can get something really good done in the next 6 months.
So when you saw those tariff cuts as a preemptive move by India just ahead of the meeting between Trump and Modi, did you see the possibility that this meeting would unleash that kind of potential, that India is making the right noises and doing the right things that would set the tone for this meeting?
Well, Vikram, look, think about it. The US and India are essentially bound to one another, whether we like it or not. We have an enormous people-to-people relationship. We are the two largest free democratic nations on earth. We collaborate in so many different spheres of global influence. We have convergence strategically and economically. We have worked on Mars missions and moon missions. There's no limit to what we do. So do we really have a choice in this matter, given the great power competition that we both face and the strategic apprehensions that we both are worried about? At the end of the day, both countries will posture in public and then they will deal in private, because what the world needs, is strong US-India convergence. It's good for humanity if we get it right. And so I'm impatient to see our trade grow from 200 billion to 500 billion. I'm impatient to see greater FDI in both directions, more innovation, stronger and more resilient supply chains that are not exposed to risk factors. If we get these things right, if we can build our common defense, ensure our deterrence, grow our citizens' happiness and economies, then we're doing the right thing. And I think President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, at the end of the day, want to deliver success for their people. They want to make America great again. They want to make India great again. So let's let the two leaders behind closed doors have their privileged conversation. It is a delight to me that it's happening 3 weeks after President Trump took office. There's a little bit of public posturing going on. That's normal as you begin a negotiation. And let's see what comes of it.
So yes, public posturing is an important piece before any kind of negotiation. But in that sense, it's not recent, because the trade relationship between the two countries has seen its share of tensions, especially when it comes to tariffs. Do you think this meeting is going to signal a reset, a resolution on long-standing irritants when it comes to the trade that the two countries have?
Well, I certainly hope so. As I said, we've kind of plateaued in our trade relationship. And given that India is the fastest growing large economy on earth and that we also have been growing, it's unacceptable that US-India trade is essentially flat. So we need to give it a boost. We need to apply jumper cables. If it takes a little bit of posturing to get there and to have structural improvements, that's good. If you think about it, India has engaged over the years in very ambitious systemic reforms to liberalize its economy. And it has seen enormous benefits from that. But there are still more reforms needed in India. And if India can make those reforms, especially in its relations with the United States, I think you're going to see a rather significant increase in the trade volumes, investment volumes, technology collaboration, shared production of defense articles. So reform is needed, opening up is needed. I think in America, we have a very robust, open market for foreign investors. We take great care of Indian companies in America because we view them as helping generate our prosperity and upskilling our workers and paying taxes here. So, we want a level playing field. We don't want unfair arrangements. We just want fair and equal and reciprocal level playing field that will be beneficial, and an open and clear set of rules and a framework that companies can refer to if there's ever a problem.
Yeah.
Right now between the US and India, we have no framework for companies to go back to the governments when they run into an investor issue. Let's get that done. It is well nigh time for these things to be addressed.
Well, certainly, but when you talk about the possibilities in defense ties, for example, as far as India is concerned, our budgets are not as huge as they are in the United States. But if you look at the possibilities and what America wants to push right now, it would be in the sphere of selling defense products. Do you think it's an important piece for India to accept that, even if India finds it expensive?
Well, I mean, look, this is a sovereign decision for India. And India does have over $650 billion in foreign currency reserves, and it's a growing economy and a growing tax base thanks to the GST reforms. So India has more and more capability to afford these things, but this is where you negotiate. And India also has to decide if it wants world-class deterrence with world-class military platforms with a proven track record of reliability and capability. And if the US and India can talk together about what those needs are and how they can be addressed, I think there's a very collaborative frame in which things can be done. There's already a little bit of co-production happening in the Indian aerospace industry around Hyderabad between your private sector and our private sector. Why don't we double down on that? Maybe there are elements of shipbuilding that can be done between the United States and India where we share our collaborative advantage in order to make the costs lower and the production faster, and that would enhance our shared national deterrence.
Yes.
We could do that in fighter planes. We could do that in drone manufacturing. There's no limit to what we could do if we decide to break down bureaucratic barriers, take it as a sense of partnership, and identify the needs and then fill them. At the end of the day, our competitors are racing ahead. This is a foot race. We have to get ahead as well. And so I would hope that our bureaucracies can be creative. And this is where the personal relationship between the president and the prime minister can lend an air of possibility. Because if bureaucrats and policymakers think that they can go to their bosses to break down barriers, much can be achieved. And so I would hope that we would use a clean sheet of paper to think about how we can really leverage this moment.
But talking about breaking down barriers, it's very important that India imports technology in a way that it can build its AI ecosystem. It's an important piece for India as it leverages its strengths in IT. But at this point in time, if the US puts strictures, it's not really about breaking down barriers, isn't it?
So here's the thing. You got to look at it from the American perspective. We have faced so much leakage of our technological edge over the years. If you look at all of the planes that the Chinese field, a lot of them are just copies of American aircraft. And they have obtained those secrets and that technology in very untoward ways. And if you look at what has happened in the past few years on AI, even in the past few weeks on AI, there is a healthy degree of concern in official Washington about the further dissemination of the American technological edge in a way that ends up leaking to our strategic adversaries. And this is what is causing a bit of a pause, a bit of reticence in taking things to the next level with many of our key partners and allies. So I think this is something that's under very close scrutiny in the early days of the Trump administration. How do we leverage the strength and genius of our societies to win the AI foot race or the defense foot race without having all of our innovation flow to societies that are structured in a way where innovation is not possible, but that copying or even stealing is the way forward in trying to keep up with us. And so if the Indian and American sides can agree on protocols that really strictly control the human and technological penetration into our systems that could result in leaks that are disadvantageous, then I think we can have a good basis of going forward. But I think it's important to consider and accept that in Washington over the past few years, there's been growing and intensifying alarm at the loss of our technological edge through, you know, unacceptable means.
Yes. Well, whether you talk about Starlink's India entry or whether you talk about a manufacturing plant of Tesla, all of these seem to be important pieces as far as the US is concerned. But when you talk about, despite the surplus that India has, when it comes to trade with the US, the spectrum of goods that the US would be able to take in and perhaps India would hope would take in, that needs to expand as well. Do you see that openness on the US side going by the meeting between Modi and Trump?
Well, we already have possibly the most open economy on earth, and it's been an enormous boon for the American consumer to enjoy basically the best of the world at the lowest possible prices. I think we want to see that for the Indian consumer as well. And we want to ensure that there's more sales of American agricultural goods, hydrocarbons, oil and gas, defense articles in a way that help address this structural trade gap, but also are good for the well-being and peace and security. A lot can be done. And as I said, Indian companies have a very free hand in the United States in terms of imports into our country, investments in our country, and we just want to see a level playing field for American companies in India as well.
Yes.
I'm the leader of an organization of 200 companies, American and Indian, who want a win-win outcome. USIBC has been at it for 50 years advocating. Yes. This is our golden jubilee. Mm-hmm. And so we want what's best for both Indian and American companies and what's best for both of our peoples.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, a level playing field, a clear framework for arbitrating any disputes, and facilitating business environment, ease and speed of doing business,
yes.
Credible and predictable regulatory and tax regimes. If you build it, they will come. If we have that, they will come. And that's why I'm very hopeful that the two leaders will be ambitious on trade during this summit.
But when you talk about free movement of skilled professionals, it's something that Mr. Trump has spoken about, that he is for it. And yet, when you talk about the political spectrum in the US, there is a pushback on that count as well, because tech jobs going away from Americans is a matter of concern in domestic politics in the US. Now, how do you get a level playing field on that count?
So at the end of the day, the president is the lead foreign policy official under our constitutional system. And he has spoken very, very clearly about skilled labor and skilled workers and skilled immigration. And indeed, he has talked for years about the need for coherent immigration reform in the United States. I work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce has been very clear about the importance of having skilled workers be able to move around to the places in companies where they can have the most impact. And the truth is that in terms of the availability of skilled workers, there's no country other than India that has the scale of skilled talent that is essential for the operations of world-class companies. There is no other place on earth that compares to India. So we have to have a conversation as friends. We have to see how we can make this a win-win. This is where, leaders meet and then they task their staff with coming up with coherent outcomes that are good for one another. At the end of the day, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi want what's good for their people. And on the skilled worker issue and H-1Bs, immigration, as long as it's lawful, as long as it's regulated and controlled by the governments, then it's a good thing. And let's work toward ensuring that that pipeline exists in a way that benefits both of our industrial bases, American and Indian.
So, Mr. Keshap, do you believe that both Trump and Modi, the two leaders, actually see eye to eye on immigration policies like H-1B visas? What could businesses expect now going ahead if you do believe that the two leaders are going to work on this together to be able to see where the synergies are?
Well, look, I would love to be a fly on the wall in the Trump-Modi meeting. So yeah. I don't know what the two leaders will discuss, but I go back to my premise earlier. We need one another. We are in an AI foot race. We're in a quantum computing foot race, a defense foot race, drone technology foot race. We have to work with one another. Indian brains, American technology, Indian innovation, American innovation. So look, President Trump has been very clear. Let's see what comes of it. But American companies do need Indian brains woven into our capabilities. Go to Silicon Valley, see the kinds of people you encounter in our world-class companies. Many of them are Indian or of Indian origin. And for free societies, we have to leverage that brain talent, or we will do ourselves a disservice.
But very quickly, Mr. Keshap, we're running out of time, but investment climate, what signals do you think this meeting sends out to American businesses that are looking to invest in India? Is there more confidence in policy predictability and regulatory ease as well?
Well, first, I give full credit to Prime Minister Modi for clear leadership on his behalf in attracting FDI and American businesses and telling them that India is ready for business. But we did a recent pain points survey inside our membership, and it was in both directions because we represent both sides. And it was clear that there are still tariff, non-tariff, and red tape issues that slow things down in India. And this is not at the level of the Prime Minister. This is at the level of the bureaucracy. And there are regulatory issues and tax issues. And so my respectful plea would be building on the great work India has done over the past decade to really transform itself. Please keep going. Systematic reform is essential. Ease and speed of doing business, bureaucratic red tape, decision-making, non-tariff barriers. Let's keep going. And then we can really see a lot of gasoline poured into the Indian economy to see it grow, which will be good for America as well. This is a win-win game. So that's my respectful plea. More systematic reform in India to really dynamize it and unleash the animal spirits of Indian business, Indian people, and also American companies in India.
Well, one thing is certain about this meeting, that it could redefine how India and the US work together across multiple sectors that we've discussed: trade, defense, technology, workforce, mobility. All of them remain pillars of this relationship between the two countries, and their future direction is going to be very closely watched. Atul Keshap, we thank you for joining us and sharing your insights here on ET Now. It's been a pleasure having you with us.